Going live on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. I know that takes 10 seconds, so let's see. I want to see if I can copy the YouTube link and put it into Facebook, but we'll see if that actually works. I'm guessing maybe not. Oh, yeah, there we are. Look, we're live now. Let's see if I click on... Oh! I'm going to mute that. Hey, we're live on YouTube. Less than a minute ago. So let's see what happens when I take this and copy it over onto my Facebook. Do. All right. And let me go ahead and tag you guys. No matter what, Jason, you're always my second Jason on Facebook. Sorry.
It's okay.
It's just kind of how it works out. Jason Knight is at the top of my Jasons.
I get it.
It's their algorithm, not mine.
Sure it is.
All right, so the link is there. I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the picture of Trump holding up a Bible.
Surprised he didn't catch on fire.
Oh boy. Well, he'd already done quite a bit at that point. Just for the sake of the show, we'll roll the open now. Hey everybody, welcome to the WTH Podcast.
WTH.
What the hell?
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 This is the WTH Podcast.
Hold on to your butt.
Jason Casey. Kareem Daniels. And Nate Darling. From the Darling New Media Studios. This is the WTH Podcast.
Hey, and welcome into another episode of the WTH Podcast. Darling New Media is open, but none of us are there right now as the city of Sacramento goes into curfew at 8 o'clock this evening, Monday evening as we're recording this. So with all of the protests going on, made the call last night not to be out and risk getting caught up in any of that on the way home for either Kareem or myself. And then we found out there's a curfew tonight. So it all works out for the best either way. So we are here. A little bit different show for you this week. It's a very weird week, and try as I might, I could not find a ton of isn't this great stuff? Although we will find humor and nonsense in everything that we're talking about. But we got some serious shit to get to, as we are on the brink of a civil war. Well, maybe not. I guess we'll see. Well, to quote the great Donald Trump, now we'll see. See, there was a laugh. I knew there would be one in there. We got a lot to get to. A little COVID-19 stuff, a lot of protest stuff, and of course, Trump stuff, and a couple of things that have nothing to do with them because we need a little bit of the balance. You know what I forgot to do? This is funny. I actually forgot to hit record on the audio board. There. So I'm going to hit record there and I'll edit that in later. I look down, I go, how long have we been going? Oh, I haven't been recording. Well, what are you going to do? Jason, how are you, my friend?
I am living. This pandemic, man. I mean, everything, but just the it's getting old. We haven't left the house. I know we're not going to be leaving it for a while, but
it's curfew.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even for me, I wouldn't be going out for another one. If we got the all clear tomorrow to go out because of COVID-19, I still would be waiting like 2 months before I went out and did anything. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's and then you have everything else going on also with the world literally burning. So I'm alive and I'm sheltered. So
In place.
Happy Monday.
Kareem, I know that you live in the Antelope area. There was a big grass fire out not super far from where you are, a little bit west of Roseville. Are you smelling the smoke?
I did not smell the smoke, but I am aware of the fire. And if there's not a house on that property between here and Roseville, it is brown as fuck. So it's pretty much, it's kindling pretty much.
Absolutely. How are you doing?
It's been an emotional roller coaster over a week with everything that's going on.
I'd like to say I can imagine, but I don't know that I can.
I'm actually at the point where I'd like to be in a titty bar with a drink, just to be able to see something else and just to, I guess, de-stress.
Fair enough. And since you mentioned that, do you have an update on your friend who moved to Texas to dance?
I do not. I forgot to get an update.
I would have completely forgotten about it, except you brought up the idea of going to a titty bar with a drink. And I'm like, oh, great. We've got an update. We don't. I of course I've been seeing a lot of your posts over the past week, and to say I can imagine, I can't really imagine. And I know a lot of it's stuff we've talked about on the show before, but this is the biggest, I would say, amount of protests we've seen across the country, at least since Rodney King. And this may dwarf that in terms of scope and number of places.
Yeah, it's I have so many mixed emotions when it comes to the actual protest. Like, I haven't been out there, and that's because I don't trust anybody that's out there.
Right.
I don't trust the police. I don't trust the white people that are starting riots and stuff. I don't trust the black people that are out there, because nobody seems to be organized enough to really understand what's going on and what they're doing. When you are a student of history, so like you said, I've talked about a lot of this shit on the show. I've been talking about this shit for almost 30 years. And for most of that time period, a lot of people looked at me like I was crazy, and not just white people, black people too.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, so nobody was listening. There would be like a group of us who could talk, who actually understood what would be going on or the things that we would be seeing. But for the most part, everybody else would be like, nigga, you know what you're talking about, or, no, that shit's not going to happen. Like, that kind of thing. And like I said, it wouldn't just be, the crazy thing to me right now is it wasn't just white people, it would be black people too. And so now to see people who have gone from, they weren't paying attention at all to what was going on, to let's burn everything down.
Right.
It's kind of like, what the fuck are you talking about? Or we haven't made any strides. Like, no, I'm not even dumb enough to say something like that, because I've seen where we actually have made progress. So it's frustrating, and it's, if you're supposed to be a leader and you see that people are infiltrating what's going on to the point where it's going to be dangerous to the people that are following you, then you should have an exit strategy that would protect those people.
Right. Yeah, it's absolutely nuts out there.
Yeah. And with all of the provocateurs that are showing up, you have a group of people, and this is the thing about this and everything that went on with COVID. These are not poor people that are marching. These are not poor people that are protesting. These are middle class kids who are looking for a cause. A lot of those people are. Mm-hmm. They're not, because poor people got jobs to go to, and they got to get back up and go to work the next day. But there are a lot of middle class kids who are looking for a cause, and this is going to be their cause for 5 minutes, and then they're going to go back to the suburbs, and they're going to be like, "Oh yeah, I marched for Black Lives Matter at one point." And if we don't have a plan, as Black people don't have a plan, an action plan for after this, we'll be doing this shit in another year or 2 years. If we don't plan to go vote, we don't plan to show up at city council meetings, we don't plan to educate ourselves on the issues, we'll be right back in the same place.
I heard, and I did not catch the gentleman's name, but I heard someone say the exact same thing on the news just before we started recording the show. If we don't do something about this, we're going to be back here again in a year, and it could be worse. Yeah. To your point, what we have right now is a lot of people who, because of COVID, don't have a job that they go to, or they've had greatly reduced hours. So they've been sitting around in the house for 2 months and they're bored.
Yeah.
And now it's like, oh, I can go out. The one thing I will say is a lot of most of the protesters I see on TV are wearing face masks. So there's at least that. Yeah. And
before we move, I don't want to sound like I'm shitting on the actual people that are protesting who actually do believe in racial justice and who are for moving us forward as a country, as a united country. So I don't want to sound like that's what I mean, but I do need to emphasize that they need to understand that this is not just a fad thing to do. Like you really need to be committed to making some change, and not be the next group to gentrify a Black neighborhood after this shit's over.
Yeah, it's very interesting. For me, it's been an interesting time because we just hit June as we're recording this. It's June 1st, and I reopened my business today, and it's by appointment. And so today I went in and did a bunch of cleaning and moving stuff around and measuring out 6 feet and all of those things that need to happen to keep everybody safe. And it's very weird. It's very weird around the building because a lot of the offices still aren't open. So the parking lot is mostly empty. And I don't know what business is going to look like as we move forward, because I don't know how many potential clients that I have that have stopped a business, who have nothing going on, who aren't going to be able to pull together a budget to do the online marketing that they should be doing. And so it's like, it's this weird roll of the dice. Like, okay, I'm doing it. It's got to happen. We're going to go ahead. We're going to go ahead safely, but there's still a ton of uncertainty ahead of, what everything looks like. And, as a new business, just trying to succeed, the next few months are going to be very, very interesting in terms of, do we survive? Can we even continue to move forward past the next few months? And it's going to be very telling in terms of, how many businesses are available for this. And when I see small businesses getting smashed and looted, it's sad because I understand how challenging it is. And then you've got that on top of it. Even if you do have insurance, it's like, oh yeah, well, they got insurance. Great. But all of the time you spend cleaning up broken glass and figuring out how much inventory you've lost or how much was damaged or what was damaged, and then you're dealing with the insurance company, that's all time and energy that you've lost toward getting your business back to where it needs to be in order for you and your family and your community to survive. And it's just very challenging. And in terms of the protesters, I totally get that a lot of them, I'm just muting Jason's mic briefly here. A lot of them are not the ones who are doing the smashing and the grabbing and the looting. Oh, there we go. Oh no, there we go. Can't unmute your guest because they chose to mute themselves. Oh, okay. It's funny because I muted him and then it's just a second there. So anyway, yeah, it's in 2020 is the year of uncertainty, and it's not getting better is what I will say. We're through 5 months now. We're almost halfway through 2020, and the worst thing for human beings is uncertainty. People hate uncertainty, and this year is nothing but uncertainty in terms of where are we going? What's it going to look like? Can we make plans to do something? For myself, my dad lives in Vermont. Can I plan a trip to Vermont? Is it safe for me to plan a trip to Vermont? Me, yes, probably. Can I bring my wife? Can I bring the baby? Which are things that I would like to do. Is that safe to do? My dad is 76 years old. Is it safe for me to travel from Sacramento through a couple of airports and then go visit him with the risk of being exposed to this? I mean, these are all things that have to be weighed out, and it's just super frustrating. And that's kind of how everything's going. It's just all of those things have been in my mind, and it's very frustrating. So the thing that lit the fuse, so to speak, on all of the protesting is George Floyd and his murder in Minneapolis by a police officer with 3 other police officers standing around. And the independent autopsy that was ordered by his family is back, and they found his death was a homicide caused by asphyxia due to neck and back compression that led to a lack of blood flow to the brain. That's from the early findings from the exam, which were released on Monday. Floyd was apprehended by cops in Minneapolis only a week ago. It seems so much longer, but it was only a week ago. One of the officers pinned his knee to Floyd's neck as Floyd called out that he couldn't breathe, and he stayed kneeling on his neck for 9 minutes. Most of that time, Floyd was already handcuffed, and for about 3 minutes, he had passed out. So when someone passes out, you can get up off them. The independent examiners found the weight on his back, the handcuffs, and the positioning were contributory factors because they impaired the ability of Floyd's diaphragm to function. The report concluded that Floyd, who was 46 years old, died at the scene. The ambulance was his hearse. That's from Ben Crump, an attorney for the Floyd's family. Now, later on Monday, the medical examiner's office released its initial findings of their autopsy and also declared Floyd's death was a homicide caused by a cardiopulmonary arrest while being restrained by law enforcement officers. So that is what the incident that triggered this whole thing. It was a few days before there were any arrests at all, and there's only been one. There's been one arrest and one charge so far. And
the other thing I'd just like to point out too is that the official report had to go a little bit beyond that and say that there's other things and other significant conditions, including fentanyl intoxication and recent methamphetamine use, as well as existing heart disease. Like, get the fuck out of here! Like, there's no reason to have to, like. They said why he died. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so fucking, like, they have to tarnish his reputation somewhat. You know, there's no need to talk about that type of thing in that report.
Well, you had 2 things going on in Minnesota. So you had a police chief who saw the video and clearly saw a murder. And then you had a district attorney who was still trying to figure out how to spin what happened. That's what took so long for the arrest to be made.
Now they're going to say, and there is some merit to this, at least in terms of the other three officers, that they want to be able to not just have an arrest, but actually be able to have a conviction, that they want to be able to put on a case.
And I understand that on the other three officers, but that guy, there was enough to arrest him at the time.
Absolutely.
And the fact, like I said, those were the two things that were going on. And the fact that the police chief fired them immediately.
Yeah.
That's something that's never been seen in this country in a situation like this, period.
Right.
So I can't pretend like the fact that they did that was nothing, which is what you see a lot online on social media. Is like, oh, like it doesn't make a difference. Like, no, that's a big deal. I haven't actually seen a police officer defend what happened. Police chiefs across the country have condemned what happened. My brother, who's a police officer, condemned that. And so those were huge things. The only people that you saw who were quote unquote defending it were people who weren't in law enforcement and who had no fucking clue what they were talking about. You had people like the stupid wrestling coach in Washington, and you had like some mayor in Mississippi. Like those were the people that were defending that. And have me being somebody who has done martial arts, seeing the positioning of that guy on his neck, that's clearly a move that would leave you unconscious.
John Bones Jones commented on how brutal that looked.
Yeah, that's the whole purpose in the positioning of the knee, the compression. That's the only thing that will happen from that. So, and if you listen to the guy who was telling him to get off his neck, he knew that was what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
So that was, that was a full out murder. And he may not have necessarily intended to kill him, but he did. And I think that was a bridge too far for everybody.
As it should be.
Yeah.
And it's just really interesting how these things have happened in such quick succession. You had the Ahmaud Arbery shooting in Georgia, which I guess it happened in February, but the tape was just recently released. You had the woman in Central Park threatening to call the cops on the black man who was threatening her, who turns out to be the least threatening person in the universe as he's bird watching. And we see what that threat really means almost immediately as a police officer snuffs out an African-American on the curb with his knee.
Now, that's the narrative that the news media uses. But I want to point one other thing that out in that process. And I've been meaning to reach out to one of the stations to remind them of this. What Black people also saw was white people's response to COVID-19. When the news media started reporting that COVID, most of the people who were being affected by COVID, that was when white people was like, fuck it, we need to get back out and do our thing.
That's a fair point. And as you mention it, it's like, oh yeah, that was when everybody was like, I need to get my hair cut.
Yes. So as soon as they started reporting that most of the cases were Black and brown people, that was when white people were like, oh, well, it's not us. So let's go back to getting haircuts and doing everything. That's when the protests started. And we saw that shit.
Yeah, I don't know that the protests are the protests about reopening. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't want to confuse the two protests.
Yeah, and we saw that and took that to heart. So that's a big thing that happened that that the media keeps. They're not connecting it, but it's a really big part of what's going on.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense. Now, earlier today, as we record this on Monday, Donald Trump has declared Antifa a terrorist organization, which is interesting because a Twitter account claiming to belong to the National Antifa organization. By the way, there isn't a National Antifa organization.
No.
So there's your first problem. Pushing violent rhetoric related to ongoing protests has been linked to the white nationalist group Identity Europa, according to a Twitter spokesperson. The spokesperson said the account violated the company's platform manipulation and spam policy, specifically the creation of fake accounts. Twitter suspended the account after a tweet that incited violence. As protests were taking place in multiple states across the U.S. Sunday night, a newly created account at Antifa_US tweeted, "Tonight's the night, comrades," with a brown raised fist emoji, and "Tonight we fuck the city and we move into the residential areas, the white hoods, and take what's ours." Wow. So that's the, when you're talking about the violence and the looting, it's those folks in Minnesota. Most of the people that got arrested for looting in the first few days there were from out of state. They weren't people burning their own neighborhoods. I saw a video in DC of, there was someone basically smashing out a curb with a hammer or something, and the protesters grabbed him and turned him over to the cops. There have been tons and tons of instances of video of protesters and cops getting along, showing that they are peacefully coexisting, that they respect each other. Yeah. So let's not get caught up in the few people that are looting and destroying and all of the other things that are going on across the country. I heard today that over the weekend, there was $10 million in damage to downtown and midtown Sacramento because of the looting. Now, I don't know how much of that was because they smashed all of the windows and pretty much emptied Sharif's Jewelers, which I'm guessing had a pretty good amount of merchandise in their store.
Somebody I saw said that they didn't get a lot of the stuff was locked up, but they did probably get a lot of damage there too.
Yeah, I mean those windows are expensive, and even if they locked up the more valuable stuff, even if you're just getting away with the $400 or $500 stuff, that adds up.
Yeah, and again, that's my thing with people without a plan. Those people actually do a lot in the community, and you didn't damage you didn't damage anybody who actually could afford to be damaged.
Well, Macy's.
Yeah.
But even Macy's.
Yeah.
I mean, Macy's is closing stores all over the country. This idea that a large retailer isn't going to feel any effect of it is just not right. It's an incorrect assumption. This idea that, oh, well, they can absorb it, they can afford it. It all gets passed on or they shut down.
Yeah. It's like you can show up to protest, but can you show up to push a measure through the legislature?
Exactly. And we need to get that done in terms of everything else. All right. So Donald Trump came out on Monday, earlier today, if you're watching live. And he had a lot to say in a very short time. Remember when he railed against NFL players for peacefully taking a knee during the anthem? Well, now he claims he's an ally of all peaceful protesters.
I will fight to protect you. I am your president of law and order and an ally of all peaceful protesters.
I am your president of NYPD Blue. I am your president of Dragnet. What are other TV shows?
I am your president of Hill Street Blues.
Right. And then he went on to so he had a call with the governors Monday morning. Basically, he told them they were weak and they needed to step it up and control the streets and own the streets.
We will succeed. Our country always wins. That is why I am taking
He doesn't remember Vietnam. He had the bone spurs.
Right.
Our country does not always win.
Immediate presidential action to stop the violence and restore security and safety in America. I am mobilizing all available federal resources, civilian and military, to stop the rioting and looting, to end the destruction and arson, and to protect the rights of law-abiding Americans, including your Second Amendment rights. Therefore,
What about our First Amendment rights?
He doesn't realize that one comes before two.
Right.
the following measures are going into effect immediately. First, we are ending the riots and lawlessness that has spread throughout our country. We will end it now. Today, I have strongly recommended to every governor to deploy the National Guard in sufficient numbers that we dominate the streets. Mayors and governors must establish an overwhelming law enforcement presence until the violence has been quelled. If a city or state refuses,
I mean, what is that?
Yeah.
I mean, we know he obviously looks like a smug dick when he's doing. Oh, and he also added this.
I will eat your ass first.
Okay. We're not going to forget about that one at all. So that was, and as he finished his address, the security forces in Lafayette Park were shooting pepper bullets and tear gassing peaceful protesters to clear them out so that he could walk over to a church and hold a Bible up over his head.
Yes. The bishop.
Wow.
The bishop talked so much shit about him.
Yeah. It was something. It was something. I mean, I don't know.
I'm still surprised he didn't burst into flames.
Well, if it hasn't happened yet, it's not going to. Jason, what did you think of the Bible stunt?
Oh man, I was at home trying to work and raise two kids while my wife also worked. So I didn't know anything that happened today.
That's why you have Twitter.
I know I need to get on Twitter, man. I guess.
You have to get on Twitter. That's how you find out what happened. So meanwhile, right after this, Megan McArdle, who's a columnist at the Washington Post, tweeted, analyzing what just happened. At which point, our favorite commissioner from South Florida, Omari Hardy, stepped in and replied, analysis? The president just invoked a 200-year-old law on insurrection, and your first instinct as a citizen, as a journalist, as a human being, is to opine on whether his speech hit the notes his rabid base wants to hear? Turn in your typewriter. He also added in a different tweet, this is Commissioner Omari Hardy, who is from South Florida. He's a Miami Hurricane, a fourth-generation educator. You might remember him from a few weeks ago on the show when he went apeshit in a city council meeting because things were ridiculous. He tweeted, the president has spent maybe 8 seconds discussing George Floyd's tragic and abominable murder. He spent the rest of his speech decrying the destruction of capital and property and the defiance of authorities who've lost their perhaps once legitimate authority to govern. I might also mention that over the weekend, the president spent quite a bit of time in the bunker as there were protests near the White House, and apparently he's scared.
Oh, he is.
He's scared. Yeah. Oh, and a reminder from Jonathan Jones, who is the senior NFL reporter for CBS Sports. I'm an ally of peaceful protesters, says President Donald Trump in 2020, 3 years after calling Colin Kaepernick and other players who knelt peacefully in protest of racial injustice, quote, sons of bitches.
Yeah. Again, I'm reminded by a story that I told when Donald Trump got elected. And I can't remember which Roman emperor it was. I keep I want to say Commodus, but no, it wasn't Caligula, but there was another Roman emperor who got killed by the mob. And
Julius Caesar?
It wasn't him. It was
he was a warrior. I'm sorry. Oh, Kareem's frozen up. We'll never know. We'll never know who the Roman emperor was. All right. Well, Jason, while we wait for Kareem to unfreeze,
Yes.
however that works, got this other thing. So Clint Watts is an author and an MSNBC contributor. He had a series of tweets that starts out regarding the president, politics, law enforcement, and Antifa. We have a problem. Here's my story. For the last 15 years, been teaching or involved in terrorism, counterterrorism courses to law enforcement around the country. The last 3 years, he said, it's gotten weird. He adds on to his tweet thread. For years, I'd conduct an exercise for cops to evaluate extremist threats in the jurisdiction. First decade, AQ ISIS. By 2015, mixed domestic and international. Then the last 3 years, Antifa suddenly becomes the number one threat for majority class. Some in the classes from major cities have never heard of it. I was confused. We'd nearly always just seen an ISIS or white supremacist attack in the news. I'd asked, who is the leader of Antifa? No answer. When was the last time someone from Antifa killed someone? Silence. Usually amounted to vague recollection of property damage that might be Antifa. Some said that Antifa was the top priority. Literally did not know Antifa stood for anti-fascist. As a result, I just stopped doing the exercise as it became way too political. If I asked the class to name an Al-Qaeda, ISIS, or white supremacist attack, they could rapidly name off many of each type. The so-called Antifa attack was usually some guys with bats broke windows at a business. I'd also struggle to explain to them if they believed they had an anti-fascist problem. That might be a strong indicator that they also have a fascist problem, parenthetical white supremacists, since one movement would be in response to the other. Designating Antifa, if it were an actual thing, a terrorist organization, while ignoring massive spike in white supremacist violence, would be confirming ideological justifications of Antifa, likely incentivizing more people to join Antifa movement, and a downward cycle.
Sounds about right.
That's a lot to digest. I mean, to hear that that's been the case when the person who has been instructing these classes is getting that sort of pushback. It's like, how do we expect, why do we expect it to be any different when they're actually out on the streets and dealing with it? Now, in terms of Antifa, one of the things we know is there is no national Antifa. It's anti-fascist. And yes, they do pop up when there is a fascist movement. One of the largest places where you see Antifa activity is in Portland, Oregon, because they have had white supremacists rolling in from out of town, protesting and causing trouble.
Scaring off their whole state government from joining in session, like, because there's white supremacists surrounding the Capitol.
Right.
Like, that actually happened in the last year.
These are all things, and you're going to have the president of the United States come out and go, you know what? Antifa is a domestic terrorist organization, and we're going to stop them. So if you're anti-fascists, doesn't that make you, by definition, pro-fascist?
It makes you a white nationalist. It's white supremacist. That's what it is. It's by confirming or saying that there's Antifa. I mean, he said it greatly, like that. Like, he said it very well. Clint Watts.
Yeah, Kareem, we just went through the Watts thread on Antifa while you were popped out.
By the way, you're thinking of Palladius, right? Is that who
it might be? Yeah.
Yeah, it's Palladius.
Pilates? What?
Somebody didn't like what I said because my whole my computer was the only thing that went down in the house.
Wow, that's interesting. Speaking of which, Joy Reid tweeted, remarkable info coming out of Oppressor, and this was on the 30th. Governor Tim Walz, Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry, and St. Paul Mayor Melvin Carter, and now Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison, all alleging outside forces, domestic and possibly foreign, have post-Tuesday infiltrated the state and are in organized fashion setting fire to historic businesses in communities of color and causing mayhem. Ellison cited the widely circulating video of a white man in a gas mask holding an umbrella who was caught by protesters on video breaking windows. And the governor said he has reached out to the Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Defense and fully mobilized the Minnesota National Guard for the first time in 164 years. This is a continuing story, and presumably we'll be hearing it echoed in other cities. Mayor Carter said every person arrested during the protest was from out of state. The governor said it's at least 80%, and that they will begin releasing the names. Department of Safety Commissioner John Harrington says they are contact tracing arrestees. He adds that the white nationalist groups are posting messages promoting going to Minneapolis to, quote, get our loot on, end quote, and cause mayhem. He says they will investigate those using the outrage over the murder of George Floyd as a cover for illegal activity. Governor Walz acknowledged the legitimate rage and anger over the police-involved killing, but last night was a mockery of pretending it's about George Floyd's death or about disparities. So it's at least in Minnesota, they are absolutely saying, hey, this isn't the people in the community that are burning down their community. And to have elected officials actually say that is a big deal, I think, because that's not anything I've heard before.
Exactly. And then I think there was a mayor of like Seattle or somewhere up in Washington, same thing. Mm-hmm. She said that there were white males who were coming through, who were setting fires and starting the trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely. 1,000%.
Well, and then people that I know that were out protesting last night were being herded into areas where the violence was going on by the police and making them go into the area where all the violence was, like not allowing them to leave or disperse elsewhere, like making them go into the violence.
So now they're associated with it because they're in the same area.
Right.
Yeah. And if you've looked at some of the stuff that I posted, you see that there are articles that have been saying for the last 10 years that right wing and white supremacists were infiltrating the police departments and the military specifically for that purpose.
Well, they're hiring.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw the video of the police officer in New York that flashed the OK sign while everything was going on there.
No, I did not.
Yeah, so there's a video of that, and he was like proud of it, and just the whole reaction to a lot of those officers about the fact that they're cameras and they like, okay, whatever. That's another disturbing part. But another good thing that happened today was that the police chief in Louisville, that the mayor of Louisville fired the police chief because his police officers didn't have their body cam on when somebody was killed last night.
That's exactly the next thing we're going to talk about.
Unbelievable.
David McAtee, who was the owner of Yaya's Barbecue in Western Louisville, ended up getting shot and killed, and no police had their body cams on. None. By the way, in case that wasn't enough to outrage you, he actually would feed cops for free. Like the cops would come in and eat, and he would never charge them.
Yeah. And I think I said this probably last month on the show about a book that I had just finished listening to, The Devil in the Grove. A lot of times when situations pop up like this, white people have used these opportunities to take down black people who they felt had got out of their place. So you have to pay attention because this is historically what has happened.
Yeah. And again, it's one of those things that a lot of us never really saw because you just never saw it. And if it wasn't part of your reality, it does sound far-fetched. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It sounds far-fetched to Candace Owens, of course, because she is now claiming that the Minneapolis protests are, quote, media manufactured race war. She's a right-wing commentator, and she's been on a days-long tear against those outraged at the death of George Floyd, claiming that the response to Floyd's death is a media manufactured race war. Floyd died a week ago. We already went through that. Owens tweeted sarcastically on Friday that the response to Floyd's death would solve the coronavirus, calling the reaction a media manufactured race war. She tweeted, "Forget hydroxychloroquine or Bill Gates vaccines. Turns out the real cure to coronavirus is media manufactured race war. The only cure to media-induced panic is more media-induced panic. We are saved."
Candace Owens is a shill. She'll say whatever she needs to say to get paid. And that's as seriously as you should take her.
She faced criticism earlier in the week for her baseless suggestion that protests in Minnesota were being funded by billionaire progressive donor George Soros via his Open Society Foundation, and for claiming that black people, quote, jump like a fucking trained chimpanzee, end quote, when they see stories of white police officers killing black people.
So there are do either one of you remember Ward Connolly?
I don't.
No.
So okay, so back when man, I'm getting old. So back when there was this push against affirmative action across the country, he was the black person that they rolled out to talk against affirmative action.
Okay.
He's I used to know his son, and I've met him on 2 occasions. So he would be the person that they would bring to talk about this kind of stuff. And he's originally from Louisiana. So Time Magazine was doing a town hall style tour across the country. And so he was on a panel that was on there. So this is how you have to handle people like Candace Owens. When Ward first got on the stage, there was a black guy that was in the audience who called him all sorts of names, and he got escorted out. And Ward was prepared for that. So I asked Ward a question when it came time. Which my question to him was, when was the last time that you applied for an entry-level job? And he said, if you're saying that you were discriminated against, then there are laws on the books against that. And I said, well, I thought you said discrimination doesn't exist anymore. And his response to that was, I never said that. I never said that. And you can't, those people, you have to strategically ask them questions because they're prepared for the normal firing. And then the other time that I ran into him was a similar situation. And he, as you said, he's from Louisiana. And I asked him point blank, like, do you think that you would have been able to accomplish all the things that you have accomplished had you stayed in Louisiana? Now, instead of him answering my question, he went into this diatribe about how a New York Times reporter had found his long lost father and introduced him to it. That's how you have to deal with these people.
Yeah, that's something else.
Yeah.
Anyway, Trevor Noah weighed in, tweeting, "We've seen this in South Africa before. Beware of agitators and instigators who use legitimate protests to ignite chaos between protesters and police."
And again, that's what I say. There are people that just want to destroy shit. They don't have any other purpose, and they take advantage at times like this. There's a quote that people keep using, that Black people keep using about it. They say that is an old African proverb that says that if the child doesn't feel the warmth of the village, it'll burn it down to feel the heat from the flames. But that's going on. But I actually think that it should be applied to white people and to white, young white males, because that's who right now is the group that actually is trying to burn down the system in order to feel like they're a part of something.
I think that's part of it, but Jason, what do you think of young white anger? What do you think is the cause of it? Any thoughts?
I think young white males have been angry like over the years, like at different times a lot. You know, it's just part of, I think, growing up is being angry at the world. But I don't know, man. I mean, there is a segment of America that, for some reason, the parents were racist, or weren't. I shouldn't say weren't outwardly racist, but would say things that were definitely underlying racist, and their kids got, coiled into something, and it allows them to feel angry at it. I mean, that's just the way that it is. Like, they're able to capture. It's similar. It's so similar to the way that they capture, kids in Iraq for ISIS and stuff like that. Like, it's the exact same thing that goes on. And they found something, which is burning it all down. And then it's all because of Black people and Mexicans and,
well, I think I think that's part of it. And I think the other part of it is, as you're growing up, everybody is struggling to figure out how they're going to make it in the world. There are all of these impediments that are put in front of all of us in terms of how do we achieve what we need to achieve? How do we get, quote unquote, the American dream? And they get sold this idea that people who are minorities are gaming the system. They're getting stuff for free. The idea of the welfare queen, quote unquote. And the idea that all of these minority communities are getting supported on quote unquote on the backs of hardworking white people, and that things like affirmative action and quotas is the wrong word, but when you're talking about college admissions and things like that, that those things are what's holding them down. So suddenly they go from the idea of everything is equal to now they're being repressed and they're being held down, which is interesting because of the juxtaposition to reality, that they're not really being held down. The idea that we're not holding other people down anymore.
No, there's this whole idea and this thing that comes out. Like, I know white guys that are upset and angry at the fact that there's going to be a death tax, and like that a death tax would not even apply to them or anybody that they know by like 2 to 3 times away,
right? Because
none of them make over $450,000 a year. Like, I mean, like, and don't have the type of wealth that it even matters to. And like, they get upset. They're upset about something like that. And it's something that has nothing to do with them because it's been because they've been sold this idea that, the American dream is something more than it's changed. The American dream used to be that you could own a house, have a business, and go on a vacation 2 weeks a year for white people. But somehow in the last 20 years, with advertising going off the rails as it has, it's having a Mercedes, having a 8-bedroom house. Like, there's this idea of what the American dream, and they're all sold it, and they get upset because they think other people are getting it and they're not, and that's why they're not getting it when they never would have gotten it.
Right. The idea is, if you just work hard, you too can have this unbelievable wealth that exists in these places. And you can, if you get the right breaks and certain things happen a certain way, but the likelihood that you're going to end up in a position where you have $10 million in assets and something like the death tax is actually going to impact you at all is ridiculous. Kareem has now sent me a tweet with video that there are now 2 all-white armed vigilante groups roaming Fishtown with the blessing of the Philly police. Now they've all got bats. As I'm looking at the video, Interesting.
I was also reading, like, I was revisiting an article that I had read the other day, just about arming ourselves and stuff like that, and open carry laws and whatnot, and just how the moment black people tried doing what the white guys did a couple of weeks ago, Ronald Reagan and was it Halden? When the Black Panthers, yeah, because they had been policing the police. They've been policing the police, open carrying, making sure that the black community was being policed legitimately. They would follow cops. When the cops would pull somebody over, they'd yell to the person what their rights were and what they could do and what they didn't need to do, and let them know that they had their back. And then they put in an assembly member, like a bill that got passed, but they stormed the state capitol at the same time with their weapons. Like, that was the last time it happened. The way that and what happened with it, like, their laws changed. It was the only time the NRA ever came out against or for a gun law. Never again have they. So we get this idea, like, we're so fucking privileged as white people. Like, they changed fucking laws because black people were doing what they're supposed to be able to do by their Second Amendment. Like, it's so fucking nuts, dude. Like, I'm sorry. Also, right now I have the protest happening in downtown right now on my other on my Facebook Live, in the National Guard and stuff like that, and hoping that nothing bad happens there.
Yeah, I'm glancing over and seeing the KCRA is broken into programming with it. There's a lot of people in the streets as we're talking. Yeah. By the way, the other thing that's happening right now is Seth Rogen is telling people to fuck off all over social media. Who is he put out Black Lives Matter, and he got a bunch of people with their All Lives Matter, and he told them to fuck off.
Good.
And he said, if you think that's a controversial statement, feel free to unfollow me and never come to my movies. Something to that effect.
I had to very nicely say that to my uncle.
Never come to my movies, uncle.
No, I had told him to get the fuck off.
Yeah. Apparently there's something going on over in Antioch too. So be careful out there. Boy, what a crazy time. But how do we know about all of this? Because before we mentioned that, we would hear about these things, but we'd be like, yeah, that's crazy. How would that actually be? Well, Roy Wood Jr., actor, writer, you might know him from The Daily Show, tweeted this on May 26th. Black folk might be time for us to give a statue to the camera phone. Done as much for fighting racism as MLK, Malcolm, and Farrakhan combined. At a minimum, the camera phone need its own holiday. Thoughts?
He might be right.
Yeah.
I saw that and I'm like, fucking genius, man.
Yeah.
Because that's how we know about any of this. That's how we know about the woman in Central Park. That's how we know about what happened in Minneapolis. That's how we know about all of these things, because everybody's got a camera phone in their pocket.
And if that hadn't come out, we never would have known.
It's true. It's absolutely 1,000% true. Let's see what else we got. No. I'm looking at how long we've been on here, and I don't want to be on too terribly long. I found this interesting. Twitter, it won't be auto banning neo-Nazis because the filters may ban GOP politicians. I think we've found a problem here, and it's not Twitter. It's the fact that if your politicians are so close to neo-Nazis, maybe your politicians need to do some rethinking of their policies.
Yeah.
Maybe their white paper needs updating.
Hey, bro, that's fake news, all right? It came from Yahoo.
Yes, it did. It came from Yahoo. Actually, Motherboard broke down the explanation of the algorithm process.
Well, obviously a feminist front.
Yeah, you read Motherboard, don't you? That's the
more
that's
like motherboard. I'm just kidding.
So let's go to the athletes real quick. First off, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar wrote an op-ed in the LA Times about the whole thing, and I found a lot of this very interesting. He said, "What was your first reaction when you saw the video of a white cop kneeling on George Floyd's neck while Floyd croaked, 'I can't breathe'? If you're white, you probably muttered a horrified, 'Oh my God,' while shaking your head at the cruel injustice." That's accurate. If you're black, you probably leapt to your feet, cursed, maybe threw something, certainly wanted to throw something while shouting, 'Not fucking again.' And you remember the two white vigilantes accused of murdering Ahmaud Arbery as he jogged through their neighborhood in February, and how it wasn't for video emerging a few weeks ago, they would have gotten away with it. And how those Minneapolis cops came Floyd was resisting arrest, but the store's video showed he wasn't. And how the cop on Floyd's neck wasn't an enraged redneck stereotype, but a sworn officer who looked calm and entitled and devoid of pity, the banality of evil incarnate. Maybe you're also thinking about Karen in Central Park, who called 911 claiming the black man who asked her to put her dog on a leash was threatening her, or the black Yale University grad student napping in the common room of her dorm who was reported by a white student. Because you realize it's not just a supposed black criminal who's targeted, it's the whole spectrum of black faces from Yonkers to Yale. You start to wonder if it should be all black people who wear body cams and not the cops. What you see when you see angry black protesters amassing outside police stations with raised fists. If you're white, you may be thinking they certainly aren't social distancing. Then you notice the black faces looting Target and you think, well, that just hurts their cause. And then you see the police station on fire and you wag your finger saying that's putting the cause backward. And you're not wrong, but you're not right either. The black community is used to the institutional racism inherent in education, the justice system, and jobs. And even though we do all the conventional things to raise public and political awareness, write articulate and insightful pieces in The Atlantic, explain the continued devastation on CNN, support candidates who promise change, the needle hardly budges. But COVID-19 has been slamming the consequences of all that home as we die at a significantly higher rate than whites, are first to lose our jobs, and watch helplessly as Republicans try to keep us from voting. Just as the slimy underbelly of institutional racism is being exposed, it feels like hunting season is open on blacks. If there was any doubt, President Trump's recent tweets confirm the national zeitgeist as he calls protesters thugs and looters fair game to be shot. Yes, protests are often used as an excuse to take an advantage, just as when fans celebrating a hometown sports team championship burn cars and destroy storefronts. I don't want to see stores looted or even buildings burned, but African Americans have been living in a burning building for many years, choking on the smoke as the flames burn closer and closer. Racism in America is like dust in the air. It seems invisible, even if you're choking on it, until you let the sun in. Then you see it's everywhere. As long as we keep shining that light, we have a chance of cleaning it wherever it lands. But we have to stay vigilant because it's always still in the air.
Man, I'm glad I was named after that guy.
Pretty fucking powerful words.
It's a name to live up to.
Right?
Ooh.
That is setting a high bar.
That is setting a high bar. I'm so glad that my folks had the foresight to name me after that man.
I think he explained it in a way that even the simplest of white person can understand.
Yes.
So, Dale Murphy, you remember Dale Murphy, Kareem? Played for the Atlanta Braves.
Yeah.
Well, Dale Murphy tweeted, "Last night, my son was shot in the eye with a rubber bullet while peacefully protesting for justice for George Floyd. His story is not unique. Countless others have also experienced this use of excessive police force while trying to have their voices heard. Luckily, his eye was saved due to a kind stranger who was handing out goggles to protesters shortly before the shooting, and another kind stranger that drove him to the ER. Others were not so lucky and will be permanently disabled due to excessive police force." as terrible as this experience has been, we know that it's practically nothing compared to the systematic racism and violence against Black life that he was protesting in the first place. Black communities across America have been terrorized for centuries by excessive police force. If you're the beneficiary of systematic racism, then you will not be able to dismantle it at no cost to yourself. You will have to put yourself at risk. You might not always result in being physically attacked, but it will require you to make yourself vulnerable. Please consider taking action for a more just world. You can protest peacefully. You can donate to your local Black Lives Matter chapter, the NAACP, or he tweets out a guide to how to support Black Lives Matter protesters in all cities. So I thought that was very interesting. Dale Murphy, in case you're wondering, is whiter than I am.
Yes. I find it interesting that none of the coaches who are profiting from Black athletes, and I mean college coaches, have said anything substantial. Nick Saban said something today. Dabo did his Jesus thing, but none of them has said a word.
It's an interesting time. Titus O'Neil from the WWE wrote, "Dear friends, I know you want to help. It starts with acceptance of truths our kids, grandkids, brothers, sisters, mothers, and fathers are not telling and have not been telling you lies. Our truths need to be addressed. Your truths need to be addressed. And once you hear our truths and work towards changing them, it is then that we can change the world. When me becomes we, amazing things can and will happen. I don't condone the violence, yet I understand. I don't condone the looting, and I'll never understand. I just want to live in a world where lives matter that historically haven't, and voices are heard by people who seemingly have been deaf for far too long." That's hearing from the athletes, by the way. So,
yeah.
I don't want to hear "shut up and dribble."
And on that vein, fuck you, Roger Goodell.
Right. So we're gonna skip that guy. You know what? Let's end on a couple of stories that are kind of fun. First off, we're gonna go to Canada, where there is not a fascist in charge. We're going to go to the nation's capital of Canada. It's Ottawa, where a man had a pool and he looked outside.
When a man woke up this morning to an unexpected guest in his backyard, a moose making its way into a swimming pool at home near Hunt Club and Uplands Drive. It swam around for a while in the deep end before moving up to the shallow end to stand up. It wasn't clear whether the animal was trying to find a way out or simply cooling off. Here's homeowner.
Came upstairs and walked by the window and looked out there, and there she was, thrashing away, desperately trying to get out of the pool, all tied up along with the pool cover. And so I called Marilyn and said, "Hey, there's a moose in the pool." She woke up, and that's how it all started.
Coach says he did contact the Ministry of Natural Resources. After a few hours, police said the moose at the scene climbed out of the pool, ran across the yard, hopped over the fence, and was heading for Uplands Drive and the woods beyond.
All right, there's your Canadian moose news.
Come down for some moose soup. That's a big pot of moose soup.
And they had great video of the moose in the pool too. The moose was in the deep end. The moose was just swimming around, having a good time. That was all that was happening. And we'll wrap up the show. I'm not going to call it Florida Corner, although it did happen in Florida, but we're gonna wrap it up with this. By the way, if you want to help support the show, do your Amazon shopping through the Shop Amazon tab at the top of WTHpod.com. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and it does help support the show. So we do appreciate when you do that. So thank you very much. Headline from Florida: woman tells deputies her name is Black Sheep Squarepants. Dateline Largo. A Dunedin woman was arrested after she identified herself as Black Sheep Trouble Squarepants. According to an affidavit, the sheriff's office got a call about a man and a woman walking through Largo backyards on a Wednesday afternoon. When police asked the woman her name, she told them it was Black Sheep Squarepants. White lady, by the way. The deputy questioned whether that was her real name, but the woman insisted she had it changed to Black Sheep Trouble Squarepants and that she had a Colorado driver's license with that name. Another deputy, however, then arrived on the scene and recognized the woman as Tammy Lynn Bonefield because she had been stopped several days before. Bonefield then admitted that that was, in fact, her real name. Bonefield was charged with providing a false name or identity to law enforcement and released on her own recognizance. So, Tamilian, alias Black Sheep Squarepants. All right. That's going to wrap it up for us. Jason, it's a hell of a show, right?
Yeah. It's quite a show, sir.
I would have loved to have had more humor for you, but it's been one of those weeks. Kareem, how are you? Go on, Jason.
It's difficult.
Kareem?
Be safe. Pick up a book. And let the strip clubs open.
Phase 3. I mean, I guess. And they're doing it in Wyoming with a mask. I mean, why not?
I might have to take a trip.
There you go. All right, everybody. Be safe out there. And remember the motto of the show, don't be an asshole. We'll see you next time.